Thank you. Ranking Member McGovern.
Mr. Pallone, do you want to respond to any of that?
Again, part of my concern here that I expressed is that with both of these rules, no hearing in subcommittee, no markup in subcommittee, no markup in full committee, which is regular order. And I think, Mr. Griffith, you mentioned, that we don't really check what we're doing. I think that that's the problem here. In other words, look, my understanding is that Yokohama, did I pronounce it?
Yeah.
Isn't even covered by this EPA rule or by this resolution, because the EPA rule, as I said, doesn't apply to the entire rubber tire manufacturing industry, just a handful of facilities that process rubber, as I said, who have years to comply. And that is the case with Yokohama. They're not actually covered by the rule. And I don't even know if Yokohama is part of this group. But as I mentioned, the Association of Home Appliance Manufacturers has said that they have no problem with this EPA rule. Maybe Yokohama is not part of that group. I have no idea. But I just feel that, it's kind of like the same thing. A gentleman from Georgia last week on the home water heaters, talked about his company, this Japanese company that was manufacturing these things in his district. And it turned out they were the only group that opposed this. And what we found out was that all they had to do was spend, I don't know how much, I think it was about $10 million, and they were making so much money in order to do what the American manufacturers were doing, and they refused to do it. And so they were the ones that were saying, well, we should get rid of this rule. So again, I don't know what to say. I think if we had an opportunity to look at this, we would find out who isn't impacted. Yokohama is not impacted based on what I've been able to find out. And the American manufacturers, I mean, I know Yokohama makes them here, but they're still a Japanese company, and I love Japan, so I'm not trying to say, Japan's no good. But thankfully, at least they're manufacturing here. But the bottom line is, these resolutions come before rules without having any input from Energy and Commerce. Examples are being brought up, which I don't think the rule applies to. And with the exception, maybe no exceptions, the American manufacturers have no problem with it.
Well, I don't know what to say, you just made the case why hearings are important. And hopefully in the future, my Republican colleagues will actually take the time and do hearings and bring these bills to the floor under regular order. Chairman Guthrie, as you heard in my opening statement, I just find it really hard to believe that these are the most pressing items on your agenda as the chairman of the committee with broad jurisdiction over this country's healthcare system. And I've read that you guys have been told not to do town halls anymore, but as I mentioned in my opening, I've been doing a lot of town halls, and several hundred of my constituents showed up just on Saturday to tell me it was on their mind, and none of them brought up tires or appliances. But they did bring up how disgusted they are with DOGE cuts, and they objected to the awful budget that you guys jammed through, which goes after Medicaid. So I just want to ask you some questions about some things that actually matter to a lot of Americans. Chairman Guthrie, last month, rape crisis centers that support domestic violence survivors had to stop taking on new clients because the administration froze funding for CDC's rape prevention and education program. Do you have a date when your committee might do an oversight hearing on that matter?
We don't have a date set for that.
All right. What about when the administration slashed funding for NIH clinical trials? I convened a roundtable in my district at UMass Medical School. I not only listened to researchers, but to parents of sick children who are counting on these trials and are very scared and upset. I just met today, some of you may have as well, with individuals who have type 1 diabetes, and they're in town. Again, really deeply concerned about cuts in NIH as well as cuts in Medicaid. But do we have a date for a hearing to address the cutting of medical programs for?
We don't have a date for a hearing on that, but in the last hearing that we had, we discussed this, our last markup, we discussed this, and we're going to do oversight to make sure that we have the right research in NIH and
Well, yeah,
FDA you're
what-
also referring to as well.
Yeah. What about the fact that 1/10 of the workers have been let go at NIH's Center for Alzheimer's and Related Dementias, including leading Alzheimer's researchers who have, again, I mean, it would seem to me that that's urgent enough where there should be hearings scheduled on that at the very least. You know, and let me ask you about what's on everybody's minds, and that is the cuts that are proposed to Medicaid, which would threaten 80 million children and adults who receive health care through Medicaid and CHIP. I mean, will your portion of the reconciliation bill cut Medicaid?
My assessment, we haven't sat down and had our markup yet, but you won't have the children that are, what we will offer will not affect children, disabled, people in the traditional
Well,
Medicaid program.
who will?
Able-bodied working adults.
So you're going to cut? I mean,
When we won't cut, we'll ask them to work.
yeah. I mean, and Mr. Pallone, how much does the budget propose to cut Medicaid?
Well, 880 billion, but that was instructions to the
Right.
committee, but my understanding is they're looking for another 500 billion across all the committees, and so it'd probably be over $1 trillion for us.
But we have broad jurisdiction, so it's not all
So,
going
so,
to be in
so,
Medicaid.
so, but this is actually good news. If you're going to tell me that you're going to find all those savings, and nobody is going to lose their health care, no one's.
Just say that Chairman Guthrie mentioned work requirements. First of all, in Georgia, which is the only place state that has it right now, we found out that nobody was eliminated. With the work requirements, all they did was eliminate people that were already working. Right? It's just that the paperwork prevented people from actually filing the paperwork, and they lost their insurance. But even if you did that, and you had that across the board in every state, and everyone lost their insurance because they didn't file the paper, you're talking less than $100 billion. So where's this trillion coming from?
But put me down as skeptical that somehow you're going to make these cuts and there's going to be no adverse impacts. But as we speak, and the reason why I am skeptical is because as we speak, people are beginning to feel the actions of this administration. I just met with a group of veterans who are deeply concerned about the firing of veterans from the VA health system. The suicide prevention hotline was shut down because of some of the layoffs in the New England region. And so I know you've only been chairman for 2 months, so, you know, but I think I'm stating what you already know, but part of your job here is to provide oversight, not just of the previous administration, but more importantly of this administration right now. And it's to make sure the American people are protected by preserving programs like Medicaid that in some cases, you know, keep them alive. And I don't think it's the job of the committee to, you know, to turn a blind eye when programs that impact Alzheimer's research are being cut. And again, I certainly don't think that, you know, the American people want to see these deep cuts in Medicaid. I think most Americans think that, you know, victims of domestic violence, you know, should not be adversely impacted by what Elon Musk is doing, and there ought to be an investigation into that. And I think that's where I wish your committee were focused on right now, not on these CRAs that, again, with all this happening, I mean, there's an urgency here. So I would hope that the next time we see you that we'll be talking about something more substantive and something, quite frankly, that responds to what most of my constituents and countless people all across the country are really concerned about at this moment. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you.